Welcome to The Life Unscripted. I'm your host, Rosabel Unscripted. I'm so glad you're here. In each episode, I'll be bringing you raw, real stories and deep conversations that cover everything from personal growth and wellness to real-life challenges. I'll be chatting with incredible guests who are making an impact in their communities and sharing insights that can help us all navigate life a little better. Whether you're looking for inspiration or just a dose of real talk, you're in the right place. So grab a seat, get comfortable, and let's dive into another episode of The Life Unscripted. Hello, friends. Welcome back to another episode of The Life Unscripted podcast with Rosabel. Today, I am honored to have Benny Voncken, writer, speaker, Stoic life coach, which you co-founded Via Stoica. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. Via Stoica. That's a company that I've created. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, I don't know if you knew this, but I speak Spanish. It's my first language. And so that's probably why I was able to say via.
Está muy bien, que
Because,
podemos también hablar en...
oh, great. Sí, podemos hablar en español. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because if I did not have that, I probably would have said via. I don't know, maybe. Who knows, right?
Oh yeah,
Via
we've had
Stoica?
people do that as well via Stoic. That's a part of like starting a brand. You have to also show people how to pronounce it. But yeah, no, you
Yes.
did it excellent. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a little, so Spanish is so close to Italian, French, Portuguese. So I love it.
Yeah,
Benny, you grew up in a small town, in a small village in the Netherlands. What is it like to grow up out there?
well, the Netherlands is a very small and flat country. Apart from like the south where I grew up is a little bit hilly, but like small, I'm talking like 1,500 people small. So there's like, we didn't have a bus or a train. We had to go to school for like 10 kilometers. I don't know what that is in miles, maybe 15 or something, like in the snow, like in the heat, like rain, whatever. Like my parents were both working. So I was cycling like every day, like back and forth. That's kind of like growing up in a small town, in a small village in the Netherlands, and we do everything by bike. I didn't get my driving license. I moved to Spain when I was, I think, 25, and that's where I got my driving license because it's expensive and we don't really need it in the Netherlands. So the Netherlands is
Yes.
a great country, but it has it's a different one.
Oh, absolutely. I grew up in Colombia, South America. So yeah, I mean, I didn't start driving honestly until I came to the US when I was 21 or so, or 20. We walk everywhere. Of course, at one point I got me a scooter because, it's long distances, right? But so since then, you have become a world traveler. I mean, you've been guiding people towards clarity, purpose through this Stoic philosophy, which I mentioned to you is something that I'm deeply interested because my dad talks a lot about it. He's like, and I really want to talk about when you hear Stoicism, there's a lot of myth, right?
Yeah. There's a lot of negative views on the philosophy.
Exactly. A lot of negative connotations. I've been guilty of that in the past, because for what I see, Stoicism often gets labeled as people are cold, emotionless, as if like whatever time goes by and people just don't seem to care, some sort of like that. But how about we start by you defining Stoicism in everyday terms, and what are the biggest misconceptions that you encounter?
Yeah, that's a great way to start. And I think the best way for me to kind of put it for people to, because a lot of people know what Buddhism is. So for me, it's more like a Western, more pragmatic version of Buddhism, where Buddhism is maybe more spiritual, and Stoicism is more grounded in reason and logic, right? So that's more like, okay, both of them are very based on mindfulness. So focusing on the present, on being here and now. But Stoicism really asks of you to objectively look at what's happening around you, apply reason and logic, and then try to make the best moral choice aligned with virtue and live and in accordance with your nature and natural in general. So that's really what it comes down to in a nutshell. And a lot of the times, as you said, the biggest misconception is that you become the stone wall, right? That emotions, you just shut them off, you don't listen to them, you don't do anything with them. Or maybe even like in the manosphere, like that masculine part of the world that's growing a little bit now, and which is also a big reason for me to come on shows like this to show that the philosophy has so much more to give. because they advocate for like, oh, if you're angry, use it. That's your driver, that's your motivation. And Stoicism is anything but that, right? It really wants to kind of make sure that you don't act out of those emotions. Yes, we become angry, right? They acknowledge the fact that whenever something happens, we have this impulsive reaction to it. It could be anger, it could be fear, it could be, hurt, pain, grief, all of these things. But then they ask of you to pause, to really look at what's going on and why are you becoming angry at this thing that's happening, and then make sure that you don't act out of it. So that's really the profound depth of Stoicism, is to really get to know yourself. It's like, okay, these emotions happen, but let me find out why. And the great thing about it is that as you go on that discovery, you will see that those emotions happen less and less and less, because you know why, and you start to prepare yourself for it. This happened last time I got angry. Now I know what's happening. I know why I got angry, and I can remove myself from it, or I can deal with it in a different way. So for me, that's really the crux of it. And I've noticed it in my life that my anxiety levels and my stress levels and my emotional outbursts, they've reduced so drastically. And that's at the end, the goal of Stoicism is to live that, they call it a eudaimonic, life, to have that state where the spirit, your soul is at peace and calm. And that's really what they're after. So I don't know if there's so much more to unpack, but I think that's
Oh
kind of for
yeah.
me, Stoicism in a nutshell.
And then also, my understanding too, it's Stoicism tends to focus on the things you can control and kind of like leave away, because it logically, yeah, I mean, you can only control what you can control, and you cannot control what you can't. So it's like, okay, it makes sense, right?
Yeah, definitely. And that's, you have three of the biggest writers that still survive are like Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor, Seneca, Roman orator, statesman, and Epictetus, who was a a slave turned Stoic teacher, all from the Roman era. And this last guy, Epictetus, who influenced Marcus Aurelius, the emperor, he starts off with it, right? We have discourses and we have the handbook written by one of his students. And the first thing that he starts with in both of them, in the discourses and the handbook, is exactly that, what you said, what can we control? And he really states it very obvious, right? The only thing that we can control are our opinions, our judgments, and our actions, right? Everything that comes from within. All of that external part we can't control, not even the body, right? He says the body, yes, you can try to keep it healthy as best as you can, but you can still have an accident, you can still fall ill, you're gonna die at one point, right? That's not what we can control. But they tell us that even though anything that matters externally, we can still be a good person. I can fall ill and I can still be a good person. I can still do the best that I need to do in the situation. I can still be a good, parent, brother, sister, whatever my role is, even though I am struck by something that I didn't want. Right. So, yeah, knowing what you can and can't control is vital for the Stoics, and it makes life easier, to be honest. The same, it happened for me as well. The
Yes.
opinions of others, I can't control them. I can do my best and people can still not like me. That's not up to me, that's up to them.
Very, very good. And Benny, so you have navigated quite some major life events. If you don't mind, we can talk about it. I mean, divorce, some serious physical injuries, and also maintaining sobriety for over 4 years. Can you take us back to let's say, how Stoic practices help you stay centered through these challenges?
Yeah, those are, I look at the beginning when you face these things, you see them as challenges, but now I'm starting to really embrace them as something that I needed and that really helped me get to where I am right now. So, for example, with my divorce, whenever that happens, you see your future being shattered. It's something that you're trying to build up together and it falls apart, and you have to really reassemble yourself, reassess what you're going to do. And at that time, I was living in Dubai, and it's a crazy world living there. I moved from Spain to there. Suddenly, you're making a lot more money, and money isn't a good, right? The Stoics, they say that as well. Money is neither a good or a bad. It all depends how you use it. And I had to really reassess myself. I had to reassess my future, my relationships. I had to really look at myself in the mirror, and that's where I really started to see the practical value of Stoicism. To like I remember after that happened, and I used to drink heavily, right? I wouldn't call myself an alcoholic because I didn't drink like when I was alone. But when I drank, I could have easily gone there. So I kind of was fortunate to have stopped before that. But I was definitely a very, very heavy drinker, right? With the potential of being a heavy alcoholic as well. And one of those things that happened after me when I broke up, I went out and drank a lot. And I woke up one morning looking in the mirror and I saw myself and I saw the mess that I made of my room, and I was like, this is not going to be my life. And that's when I started to really look at the Stoic practices, and I said, okay, let me just see how I can improve, right? Not drinking, living better, like exercising, eating healthy, reading more books, writing, really working on myself. And that's when I made those steps. It was not a pretty moment in my life, but that really helped me to make, to climb the way up. And a lot of people, when we ask them, is like, oh, when did your journey start? It's not when they're at the top of the hill, but usually when they're down in the valley. Some people, they do get that traction when they're in a good part of life, but most people do find it in the moments when they're down on the lucks, if you will. And the same thing happened for me. And for example, with drinking, one of the biggest obstacles for me was the opinions of others. Like, I grew up in a family where drinking is just part of life, right? So it's not something that, if you don't do it, then you get kind of ostracized. I have people calling me out or maybe not inviting me anymore. So when we talk about that control, people can't, I can't control their opinion. They're going to accept me or not. If I don't drink and they don't accept me, that's their issue, right? That's not, I know that not drinking for me is the best way to go. So that was one of the biggest things that I had to overcome. And luckily I had some good examples in my family, like my sister and my cousin. But yeah, and for example, the physical injury was like, I left sports and one point my knee gave in and it kind of destroyed itself completely. So that was the end of my sporting days. So I had to readjust my physical activities, had to readjust how to use my free time, what to do there. And those things are not easy, but the Stoics teach us, again, that's something that I can't control, but I can still be a good person. I can actually use this to become a better person.
Absolutely. Use all these things to our advantage. When we think about life, life presents us with so many different avenues, and nobody has, it's not like a line, where like, okay, you're born this way and then you said this is what I'm gonna do. A lot of people find, like you say, valleys and moments where there's a lot of changes. And when we embrace those, that's what I've learned myself. When you start to embrace the changes, then life gets a whole lot easier. That is for sure. And for our listeners who want to try Stoicism, what would be like, let's say, three simple practices that they can start today?
So there's a couple of them, but I think one of the ones that really helped me a lot is one that they call negative visualization. So that doesn't mean that you have to go catastrophizing or ruminating, but the Stoics do invite you to think about something that you might be fearful of or that you worry about, to look at what's the worst case scenario, what's the worst thing that can happen. And funnily enough, I've helped with the coaching that we do. I've asked that question to many people, right? For example, people maybe going through a breakup and they say, oh, the worst thing that could happen is the breakup. And I was like, are you sure? Right, let's look at it from the other side. So you try to kind of project what might happen, and then you can realize that we have all the tools ready at hand to deal with those situations that we think are so dreadful, that we fear so much. But when we're in the moment, we can deal with much more than we think. We try to visualize it, see what's going to happen, see this is the worst case. I can still be a good person if the worst case happens. I can still do the good right thing. So, and then let's take it back to the present. Now let's focus on what I need to do right now. So that's one, no negative visualization. The other one is a big one in Stoicism, memento mori, right? They say, remember that you're going to die, and put life into perspective, right? It's a big message in Stoicism, but it also shows that, they don't see death as a bad thing. They say, how can something be bad if it's so natural, right? All of life around us is change, pretty much. Marcus Aurelius calls it the flux, or he talks about the river. He says, he quotes Heraclitus. He says, you can't step in the same river twice because it's no longer the same river and you're no longer the same person, right? So everything has changed. So how can something be bad? So I wrote about this actually on the blog, that death needs a rebranding, in my opinion. We need to be able to
Yes.
talk about it. We need to be able to take that fear out of it, and then you free yourself up to live, because once you are no longer afraid of dying, you can start to focus on what really matters. And then you can build, again, we talk about the negative sides of Stoicism, but if you practice this, you can start to build gratitude, because you can look at the people around you or the things that you have. You say, I might lose them at one point, right? The loved ones around you, they're mortal human beings. Let me use the time to my fullest when I actually get to spend it with them, and not when they're gone, think about, oh, I should have spent it more. So that's one of those lessons in, again, mindfulness and gratitude that the Stoics teach us, to be, okay, remember this person can die. And I can die. And this might be my last day. Let me use it to my fullest, right? To say, live one day as if it's a lifetime. And again, that's one of those cries to, seize the moment, if you will. And then the last one I think is one we've kind of touched on, is that Amor Fati. It's coined by Nietzsche, but they say, like, accept your fate, embrace it, don't go fighting it. If you embrace what's happening right now, then the faster you can make progress to calm, peace of mind, but also to working forward, to moving ahead instead of staying stuck in either the past or fearing the future.
Absolutely. Wow. While you were saying all this, I got so many things I wish I could go in depth. But if you allow me, this last one you said, embrace your faith. Let me tell you something that just came to mind. And I've said this before. I always been a talker, like since I'm a little kid, I was like, let me tell you, my nickname growing up was the radio, right? And so later on, life goes on, and people kept telling me you should be a lawyer or you should be in communications, you should be like, okay. But then, life goes on, and then I'm thinking I want to help people. And now I'm finding myself, well, it is difficult for me not to be able to express myself. So I am so thankful that I found this avenue, and again, by accident in a way. And so when it makes so much sense when you say you accept your fate. Okay, I convert this instead of me being like, let's say, traumatized because growing up everybody was just like, shush, you talk too much, whatever. Now I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna find a way to make this something that it's, work for my advantage, right? And then about the other thing that you said about death, that is so profound. I've been listening to so many wonderful people now more than ever, with being able to again podcast people, seeing all these wonderful videos of different, even scientists talking a lot about the near death experiences. One of the things I find when people come back, they see life in a different way. Most of them, I could agree that there's nothing to be afraid when it comes to death. They talk about how peaceful, how all these wonderful things, and it actually helps them. It's amazing. We live in fear. We cannot live this life, like we're supposed to, So that is just, some food for thought out there. And also, I think you mentioned, or perhaps not, or a little bit, right, that Stoicism is also the foundation of therapies like CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. And so, can you give us an idea, if you probably have already, but how the techniques can reframe those negative thoughts patterns and improve people's mental well-being?
Yeah, no, excellent point. One of the things that, for example, Marcus Aurelius says in his Meditations, and that's a great book on so many levels, by the way, like it's historical, it's a personal diary of someone who never wanted to be published. It's, the thoughts of a Roman emperor, and we have Stoic information there as well. And he says, our thoughts color the shapes we see life. This is kind of a paraphrase. So what CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, implies is that our thoughts, our beliefs, and our actions, they kind of work in a trifecta. So if we can adapt our thoughts to a situation, our beliefs change in our actions as well, right? So the Stoics had that already in mind, and that's why people build on that. I think it was Ellis who was one of the founders, and we have REBT as well, therapy that helped there as well. But they really knew that, again, those are the things that we can control: our thoughts, our actions, and our judgments. They have a word called apatheia, which is kind of translated to apathy, right? But it's a really wrong translation, because the Stoics, they believe in two kind of different emotions. They have the pathai, which is like anger, the kind of the negative emotions, and they have the eupatheia, which are the positive, like joy. And they really say, focus on that, right? Focus on the beautiful part of life. Focus on what you can do for yourself and for the people around you. And if you live well using virtue, right? Wisdom, justice, courage, and temperance, and living in accordance with your nature, then life is going to be so much more beautiful. And that's where you can change your thoughts, where you look at life and the world around you and the people around you as fellow human beings. So, the interconnectedness of everything, right? We're not just individuals. We are in a sense, but we're also part of this bigger part. So if you can change your thoughts to more positive and beautiful ways of looking at life, it'll change the way you see the world around you. It'll change how you see people. And it also change how you look at fears, how you look at the things that you worry about. Because again, that's something that we project in our mind. And that's something that Epictetus, apart from the control, talks about it a lot. He has a quote that has changed my way of looking at life, and it's in handbook number 8. I always mess it up when I quote it, but he says, don't wish for things to happen as you want them to happen, but wish for things to happen as they do happen, and your life will go smoothly, right? That's that Amor Fati, that's that acceptance of fate. Is like, accept the way that things are going, and your life will be good. Don't have your wants, your desires, and aversions shape your life, because you will not get them. And when you not get them, you're gonna be in turmoil, right? Or diversions, when things happen you don't want to happen, then you're going to be, grief stricken or whatever. So accept what's happening. And that's where those thoughts, that's where cognitive behavior therapy really aligns. And where, for example, coaching, Stoic coaching also helps people to change those thoughts and to focus on, okay, let me just focus on my action right now.
Absolutely. And in our fast paced world today, I'm more connected than ever. How would you say how someone can maintain that inner peace and live accordance with nature? How would you say that?
And that's
That's
it.
hard, right?
It is very hard, but it's also interesting to see when you read those ancient texts, right? We have Seneca about 2,000 years ago. And a lot of the things that they write about we're still happening. Marcus Aurelius has a list, of like, oh, we have divorce, we get kids, we do all these things, right? The same thing as happened back then. But we have social media right now. We get so much information at our fingertips, and we don't even know it's the right information. We don't even know how to process it correctly. And the Stoics, they have a really good tool for that. It's kind of called pause, right? And pretty much have a system, right? You get an impression, something happens, you get an impression because you have your own filters, your own opinions already formed. And they say, okay, wait a minute. Before you add a label to the things that are happening or the things that you read, take a step back and look at what's happening, right? It's really taking that pause. And that's why you can kind of compare it with the Buddhistic kind of sides and those other philosophies. It's just take a step back and don't believe everything you see that's happening around you. Just really look at what's going on. Try to get all the information. And they lean heavily on Socrates on this, because Socrates said, like, I know that I know nothing. And that's what we've got to assume a little bit more in this life, as like, people might be saying something, and just because it's online or just because it's on your screen doesn't mean it's real. And that's what people just tend to focus on. It's like, but this person said it online. Yeah, but it doesn't mean that it's real. So we need to take a step back and take personal responsibility for checking if the information is correct, for checking what's happening here, and not having to compare ourselves to them having a great time, because you don't know what's happening on the, in the back behind the screen when the camera is turned off. So that's something that they tell us as well. Just be careful when you place your judgment on something too fast, because it might not be what it seems to be.
Absolutely. I think in this day and age with so much information, I think that's what's going to actually make the difference. That is what is going to teach us, again, make the difference in the sense like, are we able to actually, again, make that pause? That's actually like you said, that meditation, when you think about meditation, what do they tell you? Let those thoughts go by your mind, kind of like clouds, and don't judge them. Just let them be. And then just have that moment where it's like in real life, you put things in a balance. Okay. I can't per se, I have different opinions for different people, master, science, whatever. You put it in a balance, and then just slowly take, this works for me, this doesn't. Having that kind of it's like critical thinking in a way, analyzing, taking the time to digest. That is also important. And then I think that's what's going to make the difference between the people who actually take the time to do that and the people who don't. And that, I think, that's going to be reflected in how people react to all this information, how they act upon it, So that is very interesting. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And that's also just kind of why one of the things that I don't want to turn people into Stoics per se, right? So coming on a podcast like your show, it's not like, oh, you've got to be a Stoic, but that critical thinking part, that's crucial. And I would love for people to start thinking about making their own philosophy of life, right? Take a little bit of Buddhism, take a little bit of Epicureanism, there's the rivaling school back in the Stoic days here in Greece, right? Take a bit of Stoicism, but make something that works for you. But ask yourself, why is this working for me? Why is it really, why am I upset with this? And why does this work? And it's like with the diets, right? When people say, oh, intermittent fasting, that's the way to go. Well, maybe that's the way to go for you, but maybe not for me. Maybe I can tweak it a little bit. And, the self-help books, I always see
Exactly.
it like, self-help book is the version of one person they found it how they can live better. That doesn't mean that it's exactly the way that we should live as well. Stoicism works for me, and I think it can help benefit people. But that doesn't mean that you have to become a Stoic, but at least start thinking about your life a little bit more.
I can totally relate to what you're saying, and I want to bring it into a more practical, real life example. I am a nurse practitioner. I am a medical healthcare provider, right? And we have now what we call laughingly or jokingly Dr. Google, right? Because people go to Dr. Google and they're like, I got this, and Dr. Google gives them all these things, and you can do this, do this. The only thing, unfortunately, that Dr. Google perhaps is not doing it is that critical thinking. That's why we still have a job. That's where you still have to go to your doctor and kind of get a perspective. What do you think of, what about a clinical application or day to day the difference, the experience that you have seen different things, because just because it's written in a book, and I think it's throughout the times, just because everything is written. So I totally agree with it. And that's what I love having these conversations. And my podcast here is an open space for people bring their ideas. And again, you're right, not with the idea that if I have somebody who says this, people are just going to become that or whatever or think that way. No, it's about being able to open your mind and have options, possibilities, knowing that there's not just one way, not just one way of thinking. And you never know, it could make that a big difference in your life.
Oh, and I love that example of Dr. Google. I'm going to probably, take that as an example as well. And I think, that's, our first responsibility is to make sure that we know the facts as best as we can and make our assumptions and our opinions based on that. I think that will also resolve a lot of interpersonal conflicts. For example, with the impressions, we might see someone being angry at us, but they might not be angry at all. And then we jump to a conclusion. We jump the gun on how we act. So I think that's a really, really good example there. And I like that Dr. Google analogy a lot.
Yes, and I also heard from let's say experts on, for example, body language, and they're talking about how recently I don't remember her last name, but I know her first name is Vanessa. I think Vanessa Bender or something, and she talks about the resting face. And so apparently everybody has a different resting face. And somebody's resting face might always imply that this person is sad, but then no, I'm actually not sad. So again, somebody's resting face might imply that the person is angry. So again, it's about not judging. I think actually it happens for a reason, let me tell you, because in a way obligates us to go deeper, to go and try to get to know the person. That's something that I advocate very, very much for. In this day and age of fast, everything is fast. You see all these shorts here, there, you make all these impressions, all these ideas. But when you actually get the time to connect, to truly connect with somebody, to get to understand where they're coming from, that's different. That makes a difference.
And that could change the world in so many profound ways. Like, for example, my ex, who came from Morocco, which is in northern Africa, right? It's more of an Islamic country, and I come from a Christian background, and we had a wedding party there as well, and my family went there, and they were invited to her sister's house where we sat and the families met. It was like eyes were open. It's like, hey, these are just people like us, right? And that's the great thing about traveling, which I think many more people would need to do. And I had the fortunate time to go to Colombia as well, to visit, Cartagena, Santa Marta, and Medellin.
Yes.
Beautiful places, but unless we go there, unless we see it with our own eyes, we can't really see what the people are like. We can't jump to conclusions. And at the end of the day, everywhere in the world, people are basically the same. They want to have a good, peaceful
Yes.
life for themselves and for the people around them. And people tend to forget about that.
Do you know, my thing is we all belong to one race, and that is the human race. That's the way I look at it. I see people, you get to know. I'm so glad that you've been to my country of birth and that you know those cities, Cartagena. And I am so glad you mentioned that, because I go on interviews myself. I recently was an interview and people ask me, and some people get this idea that I came to the US because Colombia was, yes, there was some violence, there were some, but things changed, time changed, peoples are different. And let me tell you, when I first got here to the US, people immediately, Colombia, Pablo Escobar, cocaine, this. I'm like, no, beautiful people, coffee. There's so many wonderful things. You just gotta go there. And they said, are there gangs out there? And I said, are there gangs in New York City? okay, there are gangs everywhere. There's bad and good in every place. But give yourself the chance to know the people, to know not everything is in a box. I'm not even in a box. And when I came here, I was like, so I'm Hispanic and I'm supposed to behave this way. I'm like, but I don't even look like anything like this people think I should be. So my approach is be yourself, no matter where you come from, no matter what religion, background, race, no matter what you look like. And I just keep on moving because I'm like, hey, I'm a human. That's the way it is,
And that's the way it should be, right? And we should be able to evaluate every person on their own merits and on their own behavior. And we should be able to emulate our best behavior to be that example that'll also affect the other people. Even the Stoics, they even go further, right? They say, if someone asks you where you're from, don't say like Athens or New York or whatever. Say, I'm from the world, right? From the cosmos, from that
Yes.
bigger picture even. And Heraclitus
Yes.
has a really good kind of he draws these circles, right, from like me, the family, or the bigger picture, the city, and then the whole picture, the cosmos, the universe.
So maybe I've been practicing Stoicism and I didn't even know. I'm going to tell you something. I read a book. It's called The Courage to Succeed, a True American Dream. Talks about me growing up in Colombia and whatnot. And one of in the chapters, I talk about how I consider myself a citizen of the world. I'm an American citizen and I am, Colombian by birth. I had that, but I'm still, and of course, I haven't been to many places in the world. I have been to some others, but I still consider myself a citizen of the world. Why? Because I welcome everybody. I'm open. And also, I talk a lot about, for example, someone like me, when I came to the US, I was like, you are not going to put me in a box of like a community or thing. I am here to interact with people from all over. I'm just Rosabel. And let me tell you, I love it because I feel free. I feel free. I don't feel like, I'm like, well, you belong to this group or the other. And I also encourage people to do that. You know why? Because when we put ourselves in little groups, then we're missing out so many opportunities, education, you name it. It's freeing.
It most definitely is. And I think it's in a time like this, especially when you look at US politics, and I don't want to bring the conversation there, but I think it's
Yes.
more necessary now than ever, right? That we have a dialogue between people instead of, we can see that people are just kind of faced up against each other, headbutting. These are my ideas. And, or if we disagree here, then we can't talk in a regular, normal way. We have to fight. And that lack of discourse and lack of education, right? Because that's something that really is important, of understanding what's going on. That's tearing the society apart. And that's where philosophy in general, but Stoicism, particularly in my opinion, can really help to learn like, okay, let's educate ourselves. Let's see and let's find out that we are connected amongst each other instead of fighting against each other. We have a duty to help each other live better. And, for example, one thing, the Stoics, they look at a person who does wrong, who is a person who doesn't know what the right thing is. So they don't do it willingly, because everybody does the things that they believe are the best for themselves and for the people around them. But if they are ignorant, right, that's how the Stoics call it, if they're ignorant of what the right thing to do is, then they can't be blamed for it. They should be, reproached with empathy, and us showing them, hey, look at facts from a different side. This is the better way to go about it. So instead of us doing the same thing as attacking them, you're doing wrong. It's like, this person doesn't know better. Let me try to instruct them. Let me try to give them the best example that I can give.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's so much rooted in childhood trauma, so many things that causes to people to act a certain way later on in life. And for us not taking the time, I mean, we do a disservice to each other by not trying to go deeper and understand, where we come from. So all those things. So yeah, that is something that I advocate very, very much for. And I am so thankful that, you're bringing this conversation, that this is what it's all about. Now, is there anything I have not asked you that perhaps you're like, I gotta get that out. I gotta tell people about this?
Well, I always love conversations like this, and it goes so fast, and I like the good questions. And I think we covered most of the things. And I just wanted to kind of, like the basic foundation of Stoicism is also built on the logos, what we kind of talked about, right? The pure reason and logic, and that's where it really stems from. And that's filled with, in my opinion, something that is lacking a little bit in Stoicism is that love and that gratitude that we have for each other. And again, it's about cultivating the positive emotions, and not acting out of the wrong emotions. And it is really a positive philosophy that can help people live more calm and peaceful. And I think that that's something that we should be doing more and advocating more for. So that's why I'm here as well. And thank you for
Awesome.
letting me speak about this.
Oh, absolutely. Benny, where can people connect with you?
Well, the easiest way is to go to viastoica.com, the website that we have. You can find the information about the coaching that we offer, the workshops. If you want to look up some Stoic quotes, you can find all of them there. They're verified quotes, not like some of the fake ones that you find out on there on the internet. Again, can't believe everything you see online. But we try to do our best. And we're on YouTube. We have our podcast as well, the Via Stoica podcast. And just on the Instagrams, the social medias, Twitter, X, Instagram, you can find us there as well.
That is awesome. That is awesome. I'm glad. Benny, thank you so much for, your insight, your wisdom, for bringing up some, your story. I appreciate that very much. And I am sure our listeners also do that as well. So for those of you really enjoyed this episode, please connect with Benny Voncken. You can dive deeper into the Stoic practice. So go to his website, visit viastoica.com/media so you can subscribe to the Stoica podcast. Thank you so much, Benny. Have a great day.
Yeah, thank you for having me on, and have a great day yourself.
Thank you. Goodbye, everybody.
If you enjoyed this episode of Rosabel Unscripted podcast, here's how you can support our show. Visit www.rosabelzofeld.com to learn more about my work, subscribe to my newsletter, and get updates on upcoming episodes. Head over to my YouTube channel, hit the subscribe button, and turn on notifications. Your subscription not only motivates me to keep creating, but also helps others discover these conversations. Share this episode with a friend or colleague.
I want to invite you, yes, you listening right now, to check out my book, The Courage to Succeed: A True American Dream. It is available now on Amazon and also Barnes & Noble. This is a story of resilience, grit, and what it really means to chase your dreams, even when the odds are stacked against you. If you ever face fear, failure, or uncertainty, this book will meet you right there and remind you that courage always has a voice. Just search The Courage to Succeed: A True American Dream by Rosabel Unscripted on Amazon, or head to the link in the show notes, because your dream is worth it and your courage can take you there.